I'm Justin Clifford. I work at Bereave. I'm going to be your host today. This is the Lost Leaders Live podcast where we help HR leaders build better support systems for their people. I mean, actually, we don't do that, but our guests typically do. I should probably modify that intro. So we're really exploring the human side of these systems, right? Systems tend not to be human. We want to explore the human side in the business impact of getting them right. So each month, we sit down with HR leaders and workplace experts who have lived it. Right? They've seen the wins, they've seen the losses, the lessons that come with leading people through change. And really together we explore how empathy and leadership and strategy all intersect. And hopefully we walk out of here with what you can do right now, just maybe even little things to build a healthier, higher performing organization. And the reason that we do these programs is because Bereave is on a mission to help companies provide the absolute best bereavement response when their employees suffer a loss. And in that pursuit, we get to meet incredible people like Ashley that can bring so much lived experience to business leaders that are really working to build those more supportive workplaces. So this is just our effort to get them in front of you. The chat is open as you see. Hi, Megan from Chicago. Oh, I miss Chicago. We'll be there soon though. The chat is open. We'll monitor for questions as we go. Highly encouraged. Make this as interactive as you can. I know we're only typing today, but it's super fun when we can kind of bring your world into ours and have a conversation as we go. We're going to go to 45 past the hour, and we will get recordings and all of the information that we've got on Ashley, et cetera, by the end of the week. Now, Ashley Hurd. Ashley, holy smokes, where to begin? All right. The combo of professional experiences that Ashley has makes her incredibly unique and gives her an incredibly unique perspective that I know I'm always, I feel very indebted to have her just even on LinkedIn sometimes. She's a three-time head of HR, two-time head or head of legal, general counsel. Two of those times she was the head of HR and legal at the same time, which is still mind-boggling to me. She's the co-host of the wildly popular HR Besties, Fast Company contributor, LinkedIn learning instructor, founder and CEO of Manager Method, and author, which we're going to talk about, kind of newly minted author. And lastly, an advisor to Bereave, which we're incredibly grateful and lucky to have. So Ashley, welcome to Lost Leaders.
Thank you, Justin. It is awesome to be here and awesome to be with the rest of the Bereave team in the background as well. And for all those attending today, including those attending from, I know, like snowy areas, all sorts of the weather. And so appreciate you and hoping that everyone is staying as safe as possible.
Cool. By the way, for those of you that are listening, if you aren't listening to HR Besties, if you haven't started reading Ashley's new book called Manager Method, or if you aren't one of her, I think I counted across 3 platforms, 425,000 followers, LinkedIn, TikTok, and Instagram. By the way, we did this 2 years ago. It was 175. I had that in my notes. That's some growth. I highly recommend doing it now. We're going to throw up some links here in a second and get them in the chat. But she's brilliant. She's entertaining. She's real. She's hilarious, all wrapped into one. Ashley, you've worked with thousands of managers. I'm just going to go right at it here. What do you think separates a good manager from an effective manager?
Okay, that's a good question, Justin. Hit me on the spot. So I'd say I have worked with tons of managers, from brand new first line supervisors through senior executives. And I think I'd have the same answer for all of them, which is a good manager focuses on what gets done. They focus on, what the goals are, achieving those. But I think an effective manager or leader is one that focuses also on how it gets done. Because as a manager, I know, and because it is important that the what gets done, but when you become effective, that's thinking about how you work with someone, how they feel when they show up to work, that actually impacts very deeply what actually gets done, and then other things from it, how they want to show up the next day, how long they want to stay, whether they tell people that you'd want to work for you to come work for you or tell them to stay far away. And so there's so many ripple effects that a good manager can get things done, but an effective one does create those real ripple effects that go far beyond that.
How do people know how to become effective managers? Like how does one become effective?
I mean, I'll speak to reality. I mean, I won't speak to like the reality is I think most people don't know how to. I think a lot of people have that question, which is probably why you have people tuning in here, or why I've built a platform that is taking my experiences in legal and HR, and just not just my personal experiences, but what I've learned along the way, and trying to bring those tips to life. Because I've said I have plenty of leaders that I work with through Manager Method, or I've written the book. But what I realized was a lot of videos on social media, that's how people learn. Because if you don't have things, then people go to ChatGPT to figure it out, or they're going on social media. I take that very seriously. And so I try to bring inputs and give advice that is, I like to have fun and bring a light approach even to heavier topics where I can, and also bring an appropriate voice when needed. But I think a lot of people have that question. And so to me, how you know whether you're effective is, are the people around you bringing things to you proactively? When you have conversations, are they telling you things that you want to hear? Like if everything sounds good when you're talking to your team, then you may not be as effective as you think, because that's a super common pressure of your team, including those that report to you, if you have many levels that you're working with. But when people are bringing to you things, whether it's a challenge they're going with, or I messed this up, people are bringing those real conversations. That's where I see the most effective leadership, not just telling you things so that they don't get fired.
Yeah, no doubt. And you and I connected a couple of years ago, and one of the things that I was so drawn to was the fact that you were building Manager Method, because I think, kind of to the point about people learning on TikTok or YouTube or wherever they're learning, I had really only learned to be a people manager by experience, by watching my own people managers or people managers of my friends. And I was doing it not well, right? And over time, I've gotten a little bit better, but I feel like, I've done it for 15, 16 years. And I feel like I should have been where I am now, like 4 years in. Like with the right training, with the right guidance, with somebody teaching me how to do the work, probably would have happened much faster. Instead, I've got maybe, a half a dozen manager type trainings or sessions under my belt, which don't really equate to being effective. So I've had to really learn the hard way. And that's why I feel so much why like there's like probably this hidden growth lever at the manager level, especially frontline managers. If you make them effective, there's probably a great opportunity for some, I'm not going to say rapid, but some growth that you're not going to get otherwise. Are you seeing that with the power of effective managers? Is there a business growth opportunity that a lot of companies you see are missing?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, there's one thing that's really been really helpful for me as far as resources is, I think of things in my head or things from experience. I'm like, well, this must have data. I love going to like Harvard Business Review, the website. Again, this is no affiliation, but Harvard Business Review, like HBR.com, and looking at their digital articles. Gallup, like they have really great research, and both of those do tend to be more practical than sometimes you might think. But they talk about things that are basic. Like just recently, I've started talking more about a study that was from, I think, 2 years ago, but it was about feedback. And I've definitely worked in places that feedback meant an annual performance review. And that's pretty much it. There wasn't that much ongoing feedback, but it talked about the importance if when you have ongoing feedback, like, okay, what does that mean? Because for a lot of managers, it's why does it matter? And then, okay, so how do I do it? And the why does it matter is important. And so the Gallup study showed that, for example, if you give annual feedback, then you'll have, people that may say, like, I'm strongly motivated to do a good job. You'll have a certain percentage of those. But if you give ongoing feedback, like regular, whether it's daily or just, as you have feedback, you're giving it, then those same team members are 3.6 times more likely to say, I am strongly motivated to want to do a good job at work. And so when you talk about things like effectiveness, again, at the base level, people have to be performing at the actual work. I know this, but it really, really is important. But often the people that are closest to those, and I see a comment in the Matt Trotsky in the comment, so totally, is these frontline managers, there is such an opportunity to unlock, and not just unlock, like you have these frontline employees that are hiding with all these skills, but you do have people that they come to work and, plenty of those people are like, this is it. Like, why should I care?
Mhm.
But when you have a manager that they show that they're invested in you, that does make people want to care. And that directly then impacts, like if people want to do a better job, they tend to then do a better job. And there's all the other research about profitability and things like that that really matter. But so I'm absolutely seeing that both from the data, but also when I talk to organizations about the changes in business performance and just overall culture when you give managers those tools that they need. That's not just a one-off training, but really ongoing support.
Yeah. That concept of ongoing support and the one-off training is super interesting, because I feel like those are the ones that I've gotten most of, right? Is the one-off meetings where everybody goes in and there's some presenter or somebody that teaches you how to have a difficult conversation or something like that. And then you got to go back to your desk. You're like, this is great. You might practice a little bit. You go to your desk and then you wait 3, 4, 5 months till the next one comes around. And that's kind of like good. I feel like if you're doing that every 6 weeks, it's probably good. But when you think about moving from one-off trainings to actually thinking about like systems, how can HR leaders, in particular ones that might be focused on growth, might be focused on learning and development, how can they start to think about systematizing that manager layer of development? Outside of becoming a manager method customer, right? That's obvious. That piece is obvious.
Of course. But I can talk about my philosophy is I mean, literally, it's so funny. This morning, I had a friend who's at a conference where Jay Shetty is talking. She sent a screenshot like, wow, Jay Shetty. I'm like, that's amazing. Or people that have been ones with all sorts of really, like, sometimes it's that level. And those tend to be pretty large conferences. Other times you may be having someone in person. You're like, oh, that's really interesting. And then you leave the session and you move on with life. Mm-hmm. And, whether it's Jay Shetty or Brene Brown or anybody else, they're not going to be then sitting on that manager's shoulder when the manager has to make a conversation or performance feedback. And it can be really hard to translate what you hear from one session into overall leadership. Like, it's certainly better than nothing, but there's a great Simon Sinek video that compares it to going to the dentist once a year and then being shocked when you have cavities because you haven't brushed your teeth in between visits. And so what I found to be really helpful is I say, like, okay, so HR, those in HR, learning and development, you should not be sitting on anyone's shoulder whatsoever. I'm certainly not encouraging that, but you're the ones that are going to be often supporting managers. And all too frequently, what that looks like is you're on a lean team. Even those in large organizations or relatively large teams, they always feel lean. But if you're the one that people are coming to, too often it's that way. You are spending your day reacting to conversations. Like, okay. And so my philosophy, and one that I found really helpful, is like, I, over a decade ago, had worked with a large organization, and we were doing a data breach exercise. So we were going around, and it was all sorts of subject matter experts, C-suite leaders, very impressive people from titles, and saying, like, okay, what do you do if there's a credit card swipe? If someone, swipes someone's credit card with their card reader? It was amazing. The expertise in that room of people in all sorts of different functions, whether it was legal, IT, PR, all of these, really stumbled about what to do in that moment. Like, we kind of know, but not really. Like, even if we've studied it up. And so these sessions were all led by a very expensive consulting firm. But what I saw that was super validating to me, who was probably one of the more junior people in those sessions, was people that I really respected stumbling through it and figuring it out. And so over time, we developed not just a playbook, but like really felt comfortable of what you do in really tough situations. And so I frame that often for HR teams to have resources to go through, but then also have some external things, because it's really hard to create the content that is on a lot of people's list. But I know all too well, it takes a lot of time to actually put that together. Mm-hmm. But they then have materials to really have your internal team be at the center to walk through it and have everything they need to do that. And so between that and thinking about for managers, okay, but if someone's going to delegate, do they have a checklist that they can use? And again, people may like adjust it. This isn't to like turn people into robots, but how do you actually provide those resources and do it proactively and at scale. And so that's my personal North Star, but a model that I've found really helpful for internal teams to recognize the reality of what managers look like. And the last thing I'll say is have conversations with your managers about what they would like to see, because there's also a lot, like I say, my videos, my tips, my book, it's not just from things I've lived, but all the time from things that I've learned from others. And so there's probably a lot of good ideas within your organization.
Yeah, no doubt. When you're thinking about, so I'm picturing all of these folks thinking through like what to do in that moment, right? And there's a whole host of topics that this could be about. That one happened to be about security, right? All these other topics that you could kind of start to drill down into with those groups. As you developed that playbook, right, for that situation, and as they starts to broaden, how do you know that those things are actually working?
Well, it's important. I mean, like anything, it's important to first start with what are our goals? Like, what are we looking for? Have we had a lot of turnover? Have we had, often people come to me and they say, oh, we did an engagement survey. The engagement survey says we need manager training. I'm like, is that what it says? And they're like, well, I'm like, because again, you don't have to share all your comments, but I can envision, because I've seen some of those, that your euphemism for that is we need manager training. But that's often what that is. But a huge part of that is internal alignment, especially with when you're looking at the functions outside of HR, learning and development. Because for better or for worse, and you can guess which way I feel about this, is if something is looked at as an HR exercise and does not have support, buy-in, active participation by people that are not just in an HR function, then you may have people that have those side chats of like, okay, this is a check the box exercise. And so it is really important that other functions really see this as valuable. And some of that is HR at times doing that research. That's why I recommend, when you look at data and building business cases of why this matters and the impact that it can have, that can be a real winning solution. But it is important to first start with, okay, why are we doing this? That's going to help you actually get it approved, but it's also important to measure that. And so as you look at things like whether it's retention or engagement, starting somewhere and having things that you track, and all sorts of other things that you can track, I do think that's incredibly important to start with that, so that it's not just an exercise for exercise's sake.
Sure. Which I feel like tends to be a lot of the manager trainings that I've been through.
I mean, it is. Well, and a lot of it's like, depending on where you are around the globe, is there can be compliance focused training. And that's something that I totally recognize is when especially if you're in a place and it's, okay, our location or our industry has these specific, trainings, and I go through them. It's the same thing I watched last year, like totally check the box. It is important to distinguish that. And so some of it, so again, one of the tips that I gave is having HR be the center and showing that you're doing it to actually support people. One of the ways you can do that is, before you do training, is talk to some of your managers and say, what do you wish our team knew about your job? Like, have that kind of conversation. Help to build that in to the extent you can in the materials, to show them this really is for them. This isn't just HR making assumptions, but is also in your communications. So like as we draft communications, and we have all templates that we do for organizations, but it's like when we announce the program, or, hey, you're going to have these are the materials to watch, and then here's the cohort session. It's never going to say, do this or else you're going to get a call from your boss or the CHRO. It's, hey, if you've struggled with figuring out how to delegate something without micromanaging it, this is what we'll talk about in this session. So I was also thinking about the communications. Very central in my book is this idea of pause, consider, act. To mean to pause and think about the perspective of the person on the other side. And the reality is, for most functions, if HR, learning development, talent, people team, whoever is involved in rolling this out, again, when you come to them with this, people, which often they should not, but people may think this is just something else to add to my plate. And so you're going to have to overcome that by showing them this is really to help them as a manager, to feel more confident, to build relationships with other managers.
Yeah. And I'm going to turn a little bit, but thinking about manager confidence, I'm going to turn a little bit to how managers become managers, which is often through their individual performance, right? And I heard you talking to John Barrows recently on his podcast about this specific thing as it relates to salespeople. You take your top 3 salespeople and you're like, boom, you make them managers, because that's the next thing, where maybe that's not really where they're meant to be, right? So they're often promoted for this performance. How can leaders really be thinking about how to ensure that those prospective new managers, before they're new managers, right? They're manager prospects, they're candidates to be managers. How can leaders ensure that they're both interested in being a manager and have that skill set to be successful?
So I'll answer in 2 ways. One is my way, and then one is also another data-backed way that people can easily find, because both I do think are important. But one is from a basic level, and a lot of what I try to bring in is kind of real talk, common sense. It's sometimes not as common, because that's exactly what happens. Sales is a very common one, and one that personally I think can be especially challenging, having lived that world in B2B sales before I went to law school for 2 years. Was you're a salesperson, you are very much an individual, bold, italicized individual contributor. You are often stack ranked against people. So when you become a manager, it's so challenging, from the work to then these people issues. Like, what am I doing? But every function, I do think it can be really hard to move from doing a job to leading a team doing a job. And so one is all too frequently, it literally is just this almost elevator path where some organizations very formally or informally have up or out. And up means you become a manager or else you're out. And so I'm a big proponent of where people can implement it or focus on it, is having those individual contributor paths, expert paths. There are plenty of people that are amazing at training others without managing them. And so really to think creatively about your career paths, and so that you're not unintentionally driving great people out the door because there's just not a place for them. But the first to back up is, do people have an understanding of what being a manager is really like? And so even before you ask people, are you interested? It is giving people a perspective, because sometimes what can happen is a manager may say, okay, well, I really like this person on my team, so I really want to put them up for promotion. They do a good job. And you have this like bias. And sometimes it's because they're super outgoing or they're a lot like me. And so when you just give opportunities to people that you think are interested, you may be missing out on people that maybe they're more introverted. Maybe they're neurodivergent. Maybe they have all sorts of reasons that they have no idea, and you have no idea if they'd be interested in management. But by giving people ideas of different career paths, it can help people consider, okay, maybe this is something I will self-select, at least learning about. And so thinking about what that's like. And as you do that for organizations, I encourage to say, okay, if you are going to explain the real deal of being a manager, would those performers that you want to be a manager want that role? Because plenty of organizations, probably plenty of people that are watching today, have seen this experiment or this reality. Someone gets promoted to manager and it's you think it's going to be a win-win. They're going to teach everyone. It's an unmitigated disaster. It's just not for them. They leave. Now you're rehiring. The team is, a bit astray, or other words. And really thinking about, okay, but generally are manager roles, like, do people feel like once you become a manager, you can never take vacation? Or once you become a manager, you have to do a full-time job and manage your teams on top of that? Is to really think about the reality of what that looks like. And there may be aspects of being a manager that are flat out challenging, but if something would drive everybody away, how can we make this a role that good people would grow into and continue to be sustainable and want to keep growing? And so that's the step that I really see people not miss. The second thing that I'll add on the data piece is, there was, again, like, I promise no affiliation with Gallup, but they've done some really good stuff lately. And just within the last maybe month or two, they had research right around this, about selection to manager and who gets picked and how you think about that. So hopefully some of my tips of really backing up and thinking about, are you giving everyone a peek into what management is like? Are you thinking about that role? But also some of that data has some really, really good insights about how to screen for that, because I think their data is either 60 or 80%. And that's a big gap in between, but people are selected for their individual technical skills, not their leadership skills or potential.
Yeah. And I love Matt's comments here about being grounded in interest is grounded in service, to the role, not because the manager is the only option to grow, which is the exact same thing, different words, but the same concept that John Barrows was talking about, right? Asking the first question, why do you want to be a manager? And they say, well, that's the next step. Probably it doesn't completely disqualify him, but also adds a role of or a line of questioning that needs to be inserted before you just plop them into the candidacy here. I think about the ability for actually, before I go there, I did want to tell a quick story. I was also in sales as an individual contributor, and my first opportunity to be a manager came up, and I had done all the things right. I had been recognized and for the things that you need to be recognized for, but I wasn't in the top 3 salespeople. That campaign or whatever it was, I was number 4. So I was immediately disqualified from starting my management career. And I had high interest. I had high drive to serve. I had those things, but the top 3, they didn't want to do it because they were the top 3.
Right.
So they went a whole cycle without new managers internally. Right. And that boggled my mind. And this was, 20 years ago, but it gave me my first peek into how development and choice and exposure and all of these things come into getting somebody to that point where they qualify to be a first-time manager.
I love the word qualify there, because for those that are in sales, and I don't know where the Venn diagram is going to line up with the audience today, but it goes,
Sure.
but qualify is a big concept in sales of qualifying your prospect.
Mm-hmm.
I was in a sales role for well over a year before I understood what that meant. I used the word. I had no idea what that actually meant, but that's about thinking about the questions that you're asking and doing that in a way that doesn't seem abrasive, but making sure we're the right product for you, or, this is the right opportunity. And so I love the idea of qualifying for leadership roles. And what that means is, again, interest, capacity. And it doesn't mean someone's ready to go on day one, because it is learning, and it's important to vocalize that. But I love the idea of qualifying. The one thing I'll add in here, because I do think in our Venn diagram, to expand it a bit, is probably a bit more in the HR people space. I'll make that assumption. But one thing, so Justin brought up, is this idea of stack ranking. So 1, 2, 3, he's number 4. One of the ways I learned the importance of my role was when I was actually just general counsel. I wasn't head of HR yet, became head of HR, but I was general counsel for a media company. And we published the list of the CEO published a list of top 10 salespeople. I went and emailed each of those top 10 salespeople. Hey, congratulations. I know I worked in sales years ago. I know what this takes. That's incredible. The response I got from almost all of them is, oh my God, I was terrified to get an email from our general counsel, which again made me realize the importance of not just being a bad news person, but building relationships. But what I also did was email numbers 11 through 20. I may have gone to 20, 22, but I emailed each of them, especially to say, I know you were close to top 10, and sometimes you aren't going to get the recognition that others might get on the big one, but that also takes a lot of work. And, there's things we can do to help support you, whether, whatever place it is, but just doing your job, how to help. The responses I got to that were like water in the desert. So one thing that if you're in the HR space is knowing, or any function, is giving recognition to other people. It's a little easier in sales when you're stack ranked. I promise you, as you probably know yourself, if you're not in sales and you see these all posted, sometimes your reaction isn't good for them. It's, I wish people would recognize me. And so just that power of recognition, no matter what your role is, can be so appreciated. And so whether it's thinking about number 4 or number 11, or thinking about some of those people on your team, giving them a kind word about what you really specifically appreciate about them. So maybe we'll have some ripple effect off this webinar, because again, that's part of what I see in effectiveness is, no matter what your role is, whether you manage someone or you just work with them or see them, is when you tell them that can have such a massive impact that lasts far longer than the few seconds it takes you to type that out.
Yeah, no doubt. I'm glad you brought that up. Kind of along those same lines, but the opposite, when they aren't doing so well, right? Managers are often in the position to be the first people to see when an employee is not doing well, right? They're struggling. Might be changed behavior, might be results, might be, all sorts of signals. And whether that in our world is maybe grief, could be burnout, which we hear a lot about lately. Maybe something personal. What role do you think managers should play in supporting employees as they go through those human moments? And maybe some of them are equally as celebratory, right? In the other direction, but they're going through some life moments. How can HR to handle them HR equip them to handle those situations well, whether they're at the celebratory, the non-celebratory end of the spectrum?
A big piece, I think, just like I try to do with whether it's a social media video or training or writing the book, is meeting people where they are. And so in HR, I think meeting your managers where they are, frontline managers through more senior leaders. Sometimes you already feel like you are a therapist. And unless you're in an organization where your managers are in the therapy practice, they probably don't have the training to handle some of the tougher moments, but they feel like, I'm going to mess this up, or what can I possibly say? And so one of the things I think can be helpful for HR teams to do is to give that reassurance to managers. Reassurance and reminders. It's like I call it the double re's. The reassurance is, you do not have to know everything. Like me, Ashley, I was an employment lawyer. I worked in 85 plus countries. I certainly do not know laws around the world. I don't know all the laws that apply in Atlanta, Georgia. I'm not a wizard, but I know enough. So I have a deep background, but I also recognize managers have enough going on. They don't need to become experts. So a lot of the trainings I initially did were things like back as a lawyer, where this is the definition of the FMLA. Okay, fine and good. What your managers really need to know is if someone comes to you and says, I need to take medical leave, or I have a family member I need to take leave for. Your managers may not know the options, because you may not know all the policies in the moment. And that's okay. Managers don't need to fake it or pretend like they know everything, but they do need to know how much it matters of literally how you react. Mm-hmm. Because sometimes managers will react negatively, not because you don't care about people, but because you're thinking about your own stress at work. Like, okay, this is a busy time. You may not realize how it's coming off. All the time, I actually hear from people that say, I later found out my team thought I was I had, I'll say RBF, or similar things. My team always thought I was mad at them because I had this reaction, and I had no idea until well on that's how I came off. And it's not about training people what face to make, but it is to say, if someone comes to you and brings you a tough life moment, you don't have to know everything they're eligible for in the moment, but just knowing, okay, let's see what we can do to figure it out. I'm here to support you. Again, all these words of basic reassurance. That can sound super basic, but that's often what people need in that moment. The reminder is, to your point as well, is you have such an impact on what's going on in someone's life. When you show a genuine interest in that, you're celebrating something, they told you something, hey, I'm running my first ever 5K this weekend. Mm-hmm. You may have an employee that tells you that, and they disqualify that and embarrass that, because you may be an expert marathoner. And so there are some managers that will hear that and say, well, 5K, well, only have a little ways to go until you got all the medals hung up like I do. Or oh, that's great. I can help you with your training plan over that. You're coming to them giving advice when it's not about you. It's when you show interest about them, and on Monday you say, how'd the race go? And, maybe you check the results online to see if they finished or things like that, if you can. But when you do that, you don't have to know what applies in the hard times, but showing basic human care and knowing, okay, we'll connect you with, let me have our HR team. Do you want me to have them reach out to you? Do you want me to get things to send you? What would be most helpful for you in this moment? Just helping to be a conduit, really a conduit in that moment. But then in those other times where it's real life celebrations, you literally showing basic interest can be, again, like water in the desert for people that can go on social media at any moment and see a million videos telling you, don't share anything personal about yourself at work. Because if you say I'm running a 5K, your manager's question is going to be, how's that going to impact us and our work schedule?
Right.
And so just remembering, when you when you find ways to support both, it really makes an impact again on people's lives and the work that gets done.
Yeah. I mean, I think about that a lot in terms of just knowing like more my brain is a lot. It's on my world, and it's very helpful when I broaden that mind and see it from other people's points of view, right? And especially if we're in a working relationship, right? Whether you've got 2 direct reports or you've got 15 direct reports, right? There's a lot of people in those lives are going to take place, and they can include you or they cannot include you, and you can have a great conversation about your boss at dinner, or you can have the exact opposite at dinner. And I feel like there's like external ripple effects that happen because of that. But a big kind of core piece of that is the empathy piece. And I call empathy as being one of my least, I think it's number 32 of my strengths on StrengthsFinder, and there's 34, right? So I'm not, it's not a strength of mine, but you have to kind of learn to at least understand it a little bit and to sit in that seat for people. How do you think about when those managers are thinking about themselves in those moments of that 5K? How's this going to impact schedule? Because you got to be training. How do they balance that empathy with that accountability, right? Like there's got to be a little bit of balance, or a lot of balance, maybe even some might argue, but how do you do both?
So in the book, I call this the pause, consider, act framework. Okay. Again, I talked about this earlier, while this sounds super basic, what that means often is literally to have a pause. Like sometimes that's a second. So like if we're in a conversation, but to also consider things. Okay, so let's use a real, and consider, let me say this, is if there's gonna be 2 things to consider. One is, what are the potential outcomes here and like probably the best outcome overall. And so again, backing into that a little bit, just like I talk about with, if you're doing manager training, like what's the outcome? How can we back into that? But when you're talking to someone, even a conversation is just to think about, okay, what's the outcome? And while that can sound super formal, like why am I going to think about the outcome of someone's 5K? But pausing to think about that is like, this is really meaningful to someone. And I'm recognizing maybe my instincts are like, how is this going to impact their schedule? Like I'm sure they have all sorts of things in this moment. I'm just going to give them that time to talk about their 5K and then act. But let's say it is a really busy time and this person is telling you they're going to be training for an ultra marathon or a triathlon, and they're going to take all this time and it's a really busy time. This idea of accountability, I say often accountability shouldn't be a bad word. It should, really think about a good word. And so some of the pause, consider, act is like, okay, this is something that's really meaningful to them. This is a really busy time. Do they know that already? Because sometimes they're thinking about communication, like, oh, I didn't tell everybody of what's coming ahead. Is this going to be sustainable? Would I treat someone training for a triathlon differently than something else? And so some of those things in your head, but then to have a conversation, because the number one thing to think about and consider, I already told you one, which was what are the outcomes? But how would I want the conversation to go if I were on the other side? And if whatever someone has going on, if there's work that needs to be done, is being realistic about that. But like the example I was going to use is, let's say, okay, so Greg is here in Atlanta area with me. So let's say we're in Atlanta. So it's a cold but sunny day here. Lee Chen is in New Jersey. We have Anahi Lovato in Peru and Alyssa Wyatt in Canada. That alone creates difference in realities. Like, Snowy, New Jersey, Sarah Navoa, you may be thinking, like, I may be, joining the team call, like, okay, let's get into work. You may be thinking, how do I keep the power on? Like, I have kids here, I have pets here, I have all these things going on. And so one is to pause and consider what are the approaches on the other side and what someone might be going through. And so even in that conversation on like a February day, maybe, hey, what's going on? How's everybody? Do we have like power check? Do we need to keep this one a little tighter because we have like some real life happening out there? And you can, like, sometimes it's having those real conversations that help you to say, like, we need to meet because we need to talk about this. We got to decide this. But also I don't want you in the way of trying to pretend like you don't actually have life happening as well. Like that comment alone can be incredibly helpful.
Yeah. The empathy piece, obviously at Bereave, we talk about a lot. And I have learned that it is a learned skill. that I can work on it and develop it, which, is helpful. Taking an optimistic view on it rather than when I got my results on that. So we're talking about empathy, we're talking about accountability, we're talking about manager effectiveness. There's just this massive, massive world of all these things that managers need to be considering, thinking about. You wrote a book on it. It's probably 300 pages, 250, 300 pages, right? There's a lot. If you were to kind of just think about maybe if you were advising a CEO, right, on investing in HR-led manager programs, how would you start to make the business case, not just ongoing, but like today, like what's the fastest path that we can get started and start to work on the effectiveness of our managers to bring all of that stuff and develop those skills over time, right? What are the things that people can be thinking about doing?
Well, I mean, some of this is we want to do it fastest, but also we want to do it right and be reasonable, because there's a huge difference. If you have a program that takes 8 hours, for example, there may be people that are like, I cannot take a day, like a full day out of my schedule right now. But okay, I could do 1 hour of it every week for 8 weeks. Can I, like that? It seems a lot more manageable, or 2 hours a week, or things like that. So sometimes this is having that conversation, because how people receive it is how people will react to it and how much they'll internalize it. And so, I think a lot of it is to tell managers to consider their perspective. They may think this is another check the box exercise I don't have time for. That's just to meet some board of directors goals that have nothing to do with the reality of what I'm trying to do on my team. And so flipping that and addressing it and saying, this isn't just a one-off program. This is to help you do the things that you're probably doing. Performance management. How do I help, if I have people that aren't performing, how do I have conversations and, help to coach them up, or recognize this might not be the role for them? How do I decide that? My best performers, can I make sure they're performing and teaching others? And so using that language to managers, and then, again, taking resources that are available to blend it in, but have that focus on really helping you. We call it in the flow of work. However people use it in their terminology, there's plenty of organizations that would, like, the word flow sounds kind of woo-woo, but when people are actually working, how do you give that information that helps them know what ideas of what they can do and say to then really find their own voice? So we have a 3-legged stool that is like videos and resource guides. So that's all done for you, but then materials to run cohorts as well. So that's the way we do it at Manager Method. And then ongoing tools. But I do think is when you say fast, is sometimes people say like, okay, cool, 8 hours tomorrow, everybody block it off.
Sure.
And then there are people that's going to create a lot more stress than it is support.
Right. So speed probably isn't the answer if you're going to do this well.
No, it's at least not speed for the sake of other things.
Makes sense. Ashley, this happens so fast when we talk, but we are at the end of our time here. Thank you so much for spending the time, sharing your insights, sharing your expertise. You're obviously your constant support of Bereave, which we always are so grateful for that, and everything else that you do. We will include, for those of you listening, we will include several of the links where to contact Ashley. Ashley, do you have a preference? Because there's a lot of places to find you. What's the preference?
If you go to my website, managermethod.com, you can find an option to contact there and see a demo, get the book, all of those things. Manager Method is a great home base.
Okay, cool. I'm just going to go ahead and stick 6 right here, including Manager Method on the top. But if you want to go straight to TikTok, LinkedIn, you can do that as well. Ashley, you're phenomenal. If you all haven't followed her yet, please do. And we will also send those links out again. So if you don't grab them in time, we'll send them in the follow-up. Ashley, any specific outside of like, hey, go buy my book, which you all should do as well. It's on my list. Anything that is top of mind, that is hot right now, that people should be thinking about as it relates to manager effectiveness?
Definitely, as I said, check out some of those like resources for data, because that's, again, sometimes it's going to help you make your case. I found that to be really helpful. Again, not just to get your way in, but again, super helpful to learn. 2 things I'll say are, 1, I see comments from Matt and Jessica, very kind, like about clips on LinkedIn or the podcast and the book. So thank you. It is wild. Again, even like people putting things online, like you put it out there and hearing kind words, like it really makes me feel great, because just like you all, when you do something at work or in your business, you're always like, how is this going to land? It feels great. So thank you, Greg, for buying the book. And I do have free resources on the book side as well for like a book club guide. But just giving a kind word, if there's somebody you see on like LinkedIn or otherwise, like adding that comment, if you ever feel corny, I promise you, it means a world of difference, just like giving a kind word at work or life. The other thing I've realized is in our business, again, whether people found me on social media or people like, oh, I heard about you from this HR contact, it means so much. So for those that have used Bereave, definitely check it out. I say this, I guess I am an advisor to Bereave. I am a strong believer in their resources. So check them out. But if you have them and you like them, telling somebody else like, hey, you should check that out. It carries so much word, and you never know who's aware and not. And so that's the one thing I'd say as well.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Be vocal about the things that are going well, and the things that you like are huge, and that impacts companies like yours, impacts companies like ours, impacts just our mental well-being. Sometimes, like those can be day makers, week makers, in a lot of senses. Well, thank you very much, Ashley. Once again, for everybody else, we'll be back with invites to our March session. Another author, HR author, another HR heavy hitter. Jessica Winder is going to be join us next month. Yeah, she's amazing. But until then, be well. And Ashley, again, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks, Justin. Thanks, Brie. Thanks, everyone, for coming.